We're going to look at the anatomy of seeds. We're going to start with a monocot seed. We're going to look at corn. So if we look at a dry corn kernel, there's going to be a seed coat and something called a tip cap, which is where the corn kernel attached to the cob, right? So, I chose a variety of very, very large corn. These are giant corn. So tip cap and seed coat. And then, if you soak these for a while, this takes a couple days for the corn. It's pretty tough. And so this is a soaked one. You're going to want to cut them in half. And if you cut them in half two different ways, you can cut it in half just right down the middle this way. You can also cut it lengthwise. Actually, it's easier if you remove the tip cap first. So we can see what's on the inside. Okay, so you can see it, that inside this monocot, most of what you see here, and I can zoom in a little bit, is endosperm. So it's the food for the growing embryo. And in this case, it's mostly starch. And then you see the embryo right in here. And what you can do, and if you cut it lengthwise, you can see that also, right? Endosperm. And there's the embryo. Now the embryo is also going to have a cotyledon, which we're going to see in the dicots. So there are two sources of food for the embryo here. Now to see it a little bit better, you can use an iodide solution, and just with a little dropper, right, you put some iodide on it. What iodide does is it stains the starch, but not protein or anything else. So you can actually see the difference much more clearly. Right, so there's the tip cap, there's your embryo. It's also called a germ, and then you can see, I didn't put it on all of it, but you can see how dark the starch stained. And if you look at this from, let's see which one looks good. Here we go. This is a good one. So this is the one that I cut right down the middle. Is that focused? Yeah. Okay, so you can clearly see that the endosperm was stained the strongest. See how black that is? Right, so that's the endosperm. Then you see two different stainings here. Actually, this part didn't get stained at all. That's the embryo. And then this part here that's not quite as darkly stained as that is going to be the cotyledon. So you can see the the different parts. Now there is a seed coat. It's a little tough to get at in the corn because corn is a grass, and grass is the fruit is called a caryopsis, and so the seed coat is going to be very, very, it's fused to the actual fruit wall. So you can see it come, you can tease it off, but it's a little tough. Okay. We'll see seed coat better in the dicots. So that's a monocot, that's the corn. So if we go for a dicot, let's look at beans are very easy to look at. So I have lima bean, I have cranberry bean. So those are two, and I have I've had them soaking. So these are dry. So there's going to be a seed coat on the outside. Both of these are dry. I haven't soaked those. If you look very closely, let's zoom in here. There's a little section here, right? See this little area here? That's called a hilum. And that's where the bean was attached to the pod. So it attached there and then it detached. And then this little indentation here, you can kind of see, it's called the micropyle. And that's where the pollen tube entered the ovum to fertilize the egg. And it's just a little indentation. You can see it on the cranberry bean also. Right? Here's the hilum. And the micropyle is not quite so visible here. It's a little indentation on this side. So if we look at the ones that have been soaked, the lima bean comes apart very easily. And the seed coat comes right off. I soaked this for too long, so this is really mushy. But the seed coat comes right off, and it comes apart very easily. So a little bit mushy. The cranberry, let's go back a little bit. Right, so this is one that's been soaking. If you you have to coax it a little bit more to open, but it opens in two parts also, just like the lima bean, just like any bean, right? Look at when you're eating peanuts, they open exactly like this, right? So, and then look at that seed coat come right off. Right, so there's your seed coat. Okay, so that's protecting the seed while it's dormant. In dicots, right, they come apart like this. Most of what you're looking at here is the cotyledon, the food source for the embryo. We can see the embryo here. And I'm going to show it to you stained. I pre-stained it because it doesn't take long, but if you let it sit for a second, it soaks. And look how nicely, let's get a little closer. There we go. See how nicely the iodide stained the starch in the endosperm. And now look at that that embryo right here. You can clearly see it's not stained. So there's a plumule, right? The part of the epicaudal. There's a hypocaudal and the radical. The radical is giving rise to the embryonic root, or is the embryonic root. So here's your embryo, your cotyledon, and your seed coat. And if you soak these for a while, they sprout. You can see this one was soaking. And the root is the first part to grow. Let's see if we can open this one up, see if it looks any different. Nope, see how that seed coat falls right off? You can see that root develops first. And that plumule is starting to grow, but then that'll come up next. And that makes sense, right? The seed has to anchor itself, start gathering water and nutrients. anchor itself so it doesn't wash away, and then then the plumule can start to grow. And it's feeding off of that cotyledon. So you can plant this and grow, and I've done it. You can just plant these cranberry beans grow really well. So plant them and watch them, and you'll eventually get your pea plant.